I just got back from my good friend Allison's doctoral graduation. It's kind of nice to see someone's time as a student come to an end at the end of the calendar year. Typically that doesn't happen. The academic calendar is on its own kind of schedule. I think this is the time of year when I most want to slow down and reflect, stay inside where it's warm. Even though I live in a really hot climate, it is actually winter here now, so it's, in the 30s and 40s in the morning, and I want to just stay inside. It somehow also is always the busiest time of year. The holidays are busy in general, but we live so far away from any of our family that it actually, this time of year, we end up traveling. I'm leaving tomorrow. We're going to be out of town for close to a month. So it's really nice to be able to spend that much time with family and try being the operative word, to set aside all of this, YouTube videos, work in general, and to take the time to reflect on how the last year has been and goals for the future. I know New Year's resolutions are kind of a sticky subject. A lot of people don't like them. I understand why. But at this time of year, I'm really feeling called to settle down a little bit. So I don't really have a plan for this video, but what I'm hoping to do here is to reflect on what the last year has brought to the channel, some of the things that I learned and the major takeaways from doing my research and being on the channel and engaging with everybody on this material, and then give you a little bit of an indication of what you can expect from the channel next year. So like I said, I don't really have a plan. I'm just going to go through some of the things that I learned this year. And my biggest takeaway, I've already said it, is that I just took on too many projects all at the same time. I found myself struggling to keep up, getting mentally burned out. Not so much emotionally burned out as just mentally burned out. I can't think anymore. I can't read anymore. I don't want to do anything. And so when you get into that state, or when you take on so many projects that you just can't keep track of everything kind of falls apart. And, I didn't intend to take a 4-month hiatus from the channel, but between the Vesta class, which I'll talk about in just a second, and also all of the other things I took on at the same time, and that's where my mistake was, I think, I became stuck in a cycle of putting in so much effort that was fueled by a need to get everything done, and I need to remember, and I can't forget, and everything is happening all at once, and then just extreme burnout, and I can't do anything for days at a time. So my main takeaway from this past year is really that I need to be more discerning in how I structure my time when it comes to work, when it comes to research, so that it sounds kind of ironic, but actually so that more things can get done. One thing that has really helped me in understanding this lesson and reminding myself how important slowness and stillness is was watching the Medea film. I mentioned it a few videos back. There's an Italian film called Medea based on Euripides' play and some of the events leading up to the start of Euripides' play. I don't know that I have ever seen a representation of the ancient world quite like this. It is demanding of its audience. It is slow. It is quiet. There's almost no dialogue and not a whole lot of music, and the music that there is is sparse and heavy. And the landscape, the design of the film, it's slow, it's open. There's a lot of open space in this film, and it reminded me that the time period that I typically talk about on this channel, anywhere from archaic Greece through at some point in the Roman Empire, their world was a lot slower paced than ours is today. And if you really want to understand the ancient world, I think, and this is a theory that I have been chewing on just the last couple of months, it is important to try and bring that stillness into your own life as much as possible. The authors that we read as classicists, as philologists, as historians, wrote what they wrote in a much less stimulating environment. They had time to sit with their ideas, to piece things out, to figure out exactly what it was that they thought and believed, and they memorized lots and lots and lots and lots of poetry and dialogue. So they had a lot of inherent knowledge to draw from. They weren't looking things up. They couldn't look things up as easily. And there was a time not so long ago when we all did that as well. And now that seems to be falling away. And I have become sucked into this pace. And it has harmed, I think, my ability to really understand concepts on a deeper level. And when I do slow down, I find that things make more sense. So in this next year, and I'm not quite to the part of the video where I want to talk about next year, but in this next year, one thing that I want to do is to slow down and chew on things a little bit more deeply, take time, read something, and then give it time to marinate, give it time to mature and cure in a way, so that the information is not just a matter of memorizing, but truly understanding. So before I get to my more concrete visions of next year on the channel, I want to talk about some highlights from this year for me, and I think it goes without saying that by far the highlight of the year for me on a professional level was doing the Vesta seminar. This was one of those times where I felt we did actually have some space to let our conversation wander. There wasn't a set schedule for each meeting. We had an overall topic that we were going to discuss to launch our conversations, but really the conversation went all over the place, and we were able to paint, I think, a broader picture of what life was like for the priestesses who were responsible for Vesta's cult. One observation that I made about these priestesses, about these sisters, is that they were so deeply, deeply, deeply integrated into Roman society. I think it's easy to assume, a girl is taken away from her family between the ages of 6 and 10 and essentially put in a convent for 30 years. It's easy to think that that comes with social isolation. And there definitely was an element of that, but as we discovered throughout our journey with Vesta and with Vesta's priestesses, is that really these women not only were still involved with their families, even if they were legally emancipated from them, but actually they were deeply embedded in politics. Not for nothing, most Vestals came from noble families, from the senatorial class, or from other aristocratic families who themselves had influence. And the Vestals lived in the beating heart of the Roman Empire, not just in the city of Rome, but in the Forum itself, where business took place, where politics took place, where lawyers and politicians and business people all gathered together to engage in the administration of the empire, and also setting the pace for Roman culture. And especially when the emperors took over the role of Pontifex Maximus, beginning with Augustus, all of a sudden the Vestals were directly reporting to the head of state. So the head of state and the head of religion, all in one person, would be in close contact and frequent communication with the Vestals. And their reach extends beyond that, but that is kind of my main takeaway, is that these women were not isolated from society. They did have a very important religious function, but they were not only doing that. They were in other matters of state as well. So I think that's probably my main takeaway from our seminar. I am planning, as I said, to collate my notes from the seminar, and again, going back to this idea, I want to let them marinate, I want to let them settle in a little bit more, and then I will make a dedicated video on this channel sometime early in the new year to share more of these ideas that we talked about. The other major highlight of my year, at least from a research standpoint, was the Element series. Can you believe that that was this year? That was actually this year that we looked at the history of the elements in Greek intellectual writing and philosophy and magic and all sorts of things. There were so many things about that series that I took away that I found to be beneficial. The first of which was just that it's a full treatment, going through every era of ancient Greek thought and reading what people were saying about this topic. I found that to be tremendously useful. And because it's something so universal like the elements, at least universal in Western thought and Western writing, that it is very easily translated into other things. So I have been in my astrology era for some time now, and so each of the zodiac signs are assigned an element, and that makes a difference. Learning the history of how each of these zodiac signs came to be associated with the elements, for what reasons, what qualities did ancient astrologers think that these signs had that they also found in the elements. And so it's been really easy to take the research from that series and bring it into my study of astrology. And likewise with tarot, you can do the same thing with the minor arcana in tarot. Each of them is assigned an element. So that has been really useful to me in my sort of more personal research. But I also found, again, getting back to this slowness, this stillness, I found that taking the time to dig into a topic in as much depth as I was able to get into, and truly I only scratched the surface, but that I think is the kind of depth that I want to get into with topics on this channel as I research. Which brings me to next year. In 2025, I'm going to keep making videos on topics in ancient spirituality, religion, magic, esotericism, philosophy. But because I will be doing slower and deeper research, a lot of the topics that I bring to the channel will come in 2 or 3 parts, probably. Not all, but some. Beginning with the rest of the Apollonius of Tyana series. So like I said before, I have 2 more videos planned for that series. We're going to walk through the text and go over what each book has to tell us. And then for the final installment of Apollonius for now, we'll be looking at Julia Domna and her world. Julia Domna was the one who asked Philostratus to write the biography of Apollonius of Tyana, and so we'll be getting into her religious life, spiritual life, philosophical ideas that were popular at her time. She was empress, and then, many more of her family members became emperors. So she was very influential for a time period. And during that time period, there were a lot of shifts and changes in how people thought and what the business of philosophy was all about. So we'll be getting into that a little bit. Those are the next two videos that I have planned coming out pretty close to the new year. After that, as I said, I want to share final thoughts on the Vesta seminar, and then after that, who knows? If you have any ideas or stuff you want to get into, you know where to tell me. Beyond the channel, I have a couple more classics related things that I want to get into. One is Ovid's Fasti. I know, I feel like all we do on this channel is talk about the Fasti, but it's so full of good stuff. So last year I read the Fasti day by day. If you don't know, the Fasti is like a poem about Rome's religious calendar. So it lists all of the festivals, gives some background, some lore, mythology, stuff like that. But it's written like day by day, not every single day of the year, but every significant day of the year. And it's unfinished. We only have the first 6 months. So from January through June, you can, if you want to, read the Fasti day by day as it was written. I like Weisman's translation, I guess Weisman and Weisman's translation of it, because they put the days in there. So it's very easy to follow along. So that's what I did last year. This year, what I'm gonna do is try and just keep track of all of the holidays and the significant days, which I will be documenting on my Instagram page. If you're on Instagram, you want to follow that project, you can follow me along there. That's also where I share more personal stuff, more like mystical stuff, astrology, lots of gardening. So if you want to see what I'm up to, you can follow me over there. On the research side of things, I have 2 academic books that I want to finish in this first part of the year, both of which I started and then gave up on and then restarted. They're both huge, huge books. The first is this one. It's called Drawing Down the Moon by Radcliffe Edmonds. I actually got to meet Dr. Edmonds right before this book was coming out, and so it was really nice to get to talk to him. He was so kind and generous, showed me his office, talked to me a little bit about his research. And really what this book is an introduction to ancient magical practice in the Greco-Roman world for a total beginner and a lay person. There's no like untranslated Greek or Latin in there. From what I remember, I read about half of it, but it was a few years ago. This book came out of an introductory class that Dr. Edmonds was teaching up at Bryn Mawr, so it kind of follows what an undergraduate course would be on a topic like this. So I really like the layout of this book. I can't tell you much more than that because I'm just restarting it again, and believe it or not, I know this is a revelation here. I'm taking notes, which I did not do last time. And if you're gonna read this book, I would recommend actually taking notes. It's pretty dense in the sense that it is interdisciplinary, and Dr. Edmonds is using a lot of different theoretical approaches to the subject of magic. So there's a lot of terms, there's a lot of names of scholars, many of which were unfamiliar to me because they're sociologists or religious studies professionals. Technical terms, coined terms, definitions for things. So I would recommend, if you're going to read this, read it slowly, take notes. That's what I'm doing. But from what I've reread so far, just in the last couple of weeks, and from what I remember from a few years ago, this is a really, really interesting, thorough introduction to ancient magic. So I can go ahead and recommend this one even though I haven't finished it. And this is the second, Hellenistic Astrology, the Study of Fate and Fortune by Brennan, who is a scholar of the highest quality in the history of astrology and also is a practicing astrologer. Brennan is the host of the Astrology podcast, and his philosophy of astrology is to look back on the foundations of Western astrology and the instructional manuals and the theoretical manuals that were written during the Hellenistic period, stuff that was written in ancient Greek, stuff that was written in Latin, and try to understand astrology just from these ancient sources, because modern Western astrology has brought into it all sorts of different influences, and just because this is how history works, things have changed over time, especially when you have ancient texts that require specialist, precise knowledge of the ancient language to read, but then specialist, practical knowledge of astrology to understand. And a lot of times, people who are experts in ancient languages are also not experts in astrology, also not practicing astrologers. And so stuff gets lost, stuff gets changed. People rely on translations that were made by people who are lacking the astrological background, or people are misinterpreting the text because they don't have a foundation in the language itself. So Chris Brennan's approach to this book is to very, very carefully go through the ancient texts and try and explain from the perspective of a practicing astrologer, a very experienced practicing astrologer, what the ancient manuals are trying to say. So that's what this book is. I am really excited to get into it. I have, as I said, started it already, and so far it has been fantastic. So those are the two books that I'm going to be working my way through in this first part of the year. And I think I will have my hands full with them. And then the last professional goal that I'll share with you, as I said, so much of research in ancient history relies on reading these ancient texts. And that is something that I have been lacking the last couple of years. I wasn't prioritizing it. I wasn't giving myself time to keep up my language skills. So this year, I'm gonna get back into Latin. There was a time when I don't want to say fluent in Latin, but pretty proficient in Latin, much less so in Greek. And so this year, we're getting back to the original texts, we're getting back to the original language, and I'm going to try and advance my proficiency in both Latin and Greek. So in service of that, with Greek, I think I'm just gonna stick to reviewing my grammar, reviewing my Hansen and Quinn, and reading ancient texts. But for Latin, we have the tremendous advantage of modern technology. And I can actually recommend to you not one, not two, but 3 sources of spoken ancient Latin that is in the classical pronunciation that will help you if you are a student of Latin and you want to get better at it, will actually give you an opportunity for another source of input. So the first is Nunti Latini. This is something that my husband told me about only very, very recently. I guess they stopped making these Nunti and then restarted. So what this is a very short news broadcast about current events that is written in Latin and read by several narrators, so you get different voices. And they also have a written transcript of their broadcast on their website, so you can read it and follow along. You can listen and then read and see how much you got. There's a lot of different ways you can use this as a language learning tool, so that's fantastic. On YouTube, we have a couple of really amazing spoken Latin channels. The first, if you're into this stuff at all, you've definitely heard of Scorpio Martianus. He's very famous because he's very good at what he does. This is someone who speaks Latin as fast as I speak English, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And he has so many videos. You can just go to any of the videos in his catalog and give him a listen. And then lastly, I might be the most excited about this one, is there's a channel called Fiant Lapides. And I have been a fan of Fiant Lapides since I started learning Latin in high school. I don't remember when I found his channel, but I started learning Latin in 2009, so sometime around then. And it is just fantastic. It's the same kind of idea. He speaks Latin and you're able to a lot of times follow along with the text of what he's saying. Sometimes he's reading from a digital PDF, and other times whatever passages he's reading are cited so you can follow along. And what I really like about this channel is that his pronunciation is slow and meticulous. So you really, really get a sense of what the word sounds like. And I think this is an incredible tool, and I'm such a huge fan of his work. And he has everything you could ever want, everything from Virgil to early modern Latin. So definitely give all of those resources a try if you're learning Latin or you want to improve your Latin skills. I'll link everything in the description down below. And that's about it for this video. I just wanted to look back at what we've done on the channel so far and where we're headed next, some more personal stuff. This is not going to be the style of video that I do all the time, so if you're here for ancient history, you will get more of that in the new year. So yeah, I just want to thank everybody. This channel has grown quite a lot this year. I reached a few milestones. We hit 2,000 subscribers, and then we hit 2,500 subscribers, and now we're over 2,700, so truly thank you. It's really encouraging that so many people are interested in this kind of material, because I think it's really interesting and I'm happy to share it. So if you have joined us this year, welcome, truly welcome. And for anyone, if this is your first video and this piques your interest, you can subscribe and we'll get back to it in the new year. All right, I gotta go pack my suitcase. We're leaving in the morning. So again, thank you so much. Let me know what you learned this year, anything that you are proud of, any accomplishments, any research milestones that you hit, or anything fun that you learned. I'd love to know all of that in the comments down below. And also, what are you going to be reading this next year? What are you thinking about? What direction are you taking your research? So all of that, just let me know. And yeah, I'll be back after the holidays, January 1st. I'll be starting my Ovid journey on Instagram. And then in the first couple of weeks of January, you can look out for that next Apollonius installment. So thanks again, everybody. Happy holidays. Yo, Saturnalia, and I will see you in 2025.